Welcome to this live edition of Rev Talk. Here is your host and author, Shane, better known to many as simply the Black Swan.
All right, welcome to Rev Talk. My name is Shane, and today we're going to be asking the question, what have we learned from history? What have we learned from history? But before we dive into that, I need to explain a little bit about what a black swan is, a little bit about my channel, before we dive into what have we learned from history. So as some of you may know, I created this channel about just over 3 years ago in February 2022, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. That's kind of interesting. I created this channel because Russia invaded Ukraine, and I went, this feels like the end times are here. That's what I thought. That's why I created the channel. I thought this feels a little bit different than before, and we were just coming out of COVID, and that was weird as well. So I created this channel. I started diving into the Bible. I began reading the book of Revelation, and I had also read The Black Swan by Mr. Talib. I read his book. I just read it. And I thought, because I have a little bit of a fascination with Black Swan events and I like the Bible, I thought perhaps I could tie the two together. So the channel is called Black Swan Revelations, meaning I talk about all the insights that I get from reading the Bible over and over again. And I just finished reading the Bible for the 21st time in June. Took me 30 days to get through the entire Bible, and I shared my journey over the period of 30 days. It actually took me 31 days. 31 days. And the reason why I use Black Swan is when everyone looks in this direction, I look this way. I would be what you call an outlier. I would be what you call an outsider. A person that thinks different all the time. I'm always looking in the opposite direction. So if the mass goes this way, I'm like, what are we missing? What are we missing? And again, I'm going to dive into history, but history has proven to us that we live in the world of extreme, not in the world of normality. That's not where we live. But yet we spend arguably 80%, 90% of our time thinking in the world of normality. That's where we live. We repeat the same things. Somebody says this, then I repeat it, then someone repeats me, and we do this in circular fashion, and then we do it again. Wash, rinse, repeat over and over again. So again, in order for me to talk about what have we learned from history, we need to go back to the origins of what is a black swan? What is it? Why does Shane talk about black swan events all the time on his channel? Why does he do this? Why doesn't he just talk about Ruth? Or why doesn't he just talk about living the good life, the happy life, being prosperous and all this kind of stuff, health, wealth, and happiness? Why doesn't he talk about that? Why does he talk about black swan events all the time? Why is he always living there? Because that's the world that we've come from. In extremism, that's where we come from. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the history of the black swan. then you guys can get a little bit more of an idea. And these are some of my thoughts that I've gathered as well based on the Black Swan book. And then also, I was having my devotion this morning, and I was reading the book of Ecclesiastes by Solomon, King Solomon. And what some people call the book of Ecclesiastes, some people will say it's the preacher. You'll see some people when they're having their devotions, or maybe they're doing a deep talk on the book of Ecclesiastes, they will say this is about the preacher preaching to people. And I will submit to you that the real theme behind the book of Ecclesiastes is you have a king that is wise, and what he did is he gathered all the information that he could possibly gather on both extremes, from wisdom to folly to madness to happiness, every extreme. He gathered all of his information and placed it before you in the book of Ecclesiastes. So that's what the word Ecclesiastes means, the gathering. Now, again, on surface cookie level, people will say, oh, that means he's preaching to people. That's all that is. He's just preaching to people. But when you go up a few levels, a few notches, you realize that he's gathering information. He's studying. He's looking at people. He's looking at fools. He's looking at rich people. He's looking at old people. He's looking at young people. He's probably even keeping an eye on his son, Rehoboam, that's coming down the pipes. And he's like, I got to leave all this stuff to him. This is madness. This is folly. This is vain. This is vanity. What's the purpose of all this stuff? I'm going to leave it to a fool after all the stuff that I built. I built pools. I talked about insects. I talk about birdies. What's interesting is I'm actually babysitting right now, bird sitting, for some friends of ours, a budgie. So when I have my devotion upstairs at the kitchen table, the budgie's there, and it's kind of interesting. We've been looking after this budgie for how long now? Oh, last night. And when I leave the room, it'll chirp, and then I'll come back and it'll just keep an eye on me if I'm walking around, getting coffee, sitting down. It's just kind of like trying to see what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll play hide and seek on it. I'll just kind of disappear behind the wall, and then it's trying to find me, and then I'll come back, and then anyways, it's kind of silliness. But Solomon taught people on insects, birds, animals, trees, plants, everything. So he gathered all this information and condensed it and put it into Ecclesiastes. So we're going to jump into the definition of a black swan. So what have we learned from history? Before we dive in, let's start with how the idea of the black swan got its name and why it changed how Nassim Taleb sees the world. And some of you might be wondering, how come I'm going on right now at 10:30 my time? I guess it would be 12:30 Eastern. It's because I know Tom Cody has his show come on at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock Eastern. And I thought, I don't want to do a show at the same time as him, but I thought perhaps every once in a while, I can't be as committed as Tom Cody. I can't, like, this guy is a machine. Every single day at the same time, he has his show on. So I will watch his show as much as I can and just get a little bit of his insights, because I think what I appreciate about Tom is the fact that he condenses the news about Israel into 30 minutes. That's what I appreciate about his channel. So if you don't know who Watchman River is, go check it out. At the beginning, some people used to think that they used to get me confused with Tom Cody a little bit. They said I kind of look like him. And I think in some ways when you look at us, you could be like, wow, these guys are like twins separated at birth. The only difference is perhaps is I have hair and he does not. But when I grow a beard and he grows a beard and I put on a little bit of weight from the potato chips that I used to be eating quite a bit, and I was with my warm clothes, I kind of look like Tom Cody. Now, Tom Cody looks like he's lost weight. I think he's actually lighter than me right now. So the reason why I say this is our channels actually started about the same time. He started 3 months after me. I didn't know him. Obviously, he doesn't know me. I think he's commented a couple of times on my channel. I'd love to have you on as a guest if you're ever watching this live. But I was always by a kitchen table and sharing my thoughts about the Bible and then about the end times and all this kind of stuff. And Tom was doing it by a river 3 months later, and his channel exploded. And I think part of the reason is the humbleness that he brings to the table, the idea that he says he's not a prophet, he's not a scholar, he's just a person that loves Jesus Christ. And if you don't get that after watching one of his videos, I don't know what you're eating. Honestly, I don't know what you're eating, because Tom will share scripture verses, and then for 10, 15, 20 minutes he'll talk about Israel and about Jesus' return, and then he'll have a salvation message at the end. And he does it like clockwork. And on Sundays, he'll have a time where people can actually post their prayers, and then he'll pray for them on that day as well. So it's a beautiful thing. And he is Mr. Consistency. For me, sometimes the only consistent thing really for me has been Sundays and arguably Tuesday nights on Uptime Community Church, thanks to Brother Bob Barber and Greg as well, being able to allow me to come onto that channel. And I've been guests on other various channels as well. But Tom is Mr. Consistent, and his channel has exploded because I think, again, what's beautiful about what Tom says is he talks about one or two things. He talks about Israel and everything around that, and then he talks about the imminent rapture of Jesus Christ. So that's when you go to his channel, that's what you're going to get every single day. And I think there's something special about sitting by a river and telling people about the gospel of Jesus Christ, telling people about what's happening with Israel and how close we are today than we were yesterday. For me, when you come to my channel, I talk about just about everything Bible, like all the books of the Bible. My goal is to hit every book of the Bible. I also teach you how to read more of the Bible, not less, more. And I like talking about what's going on in the States. I like talking about Israel as well, but I come at it from the perspective of what are we missing? What are we missing? Because everybody's looking this way towards Israel. China's pretty quiet. Ukraine and Russia are pretty quiet, or we're just used to them sending drones to each other, and then it just becomes passe after a while. So, all right, let's go back. We got to get the definition out of the way of what is a black swan. So, for centuries, Europeans believed all swans were white. Yes, there was a time in history where everyone believed, especially in North America, that and Europe, that all swans were white. The Dutch explorers landed in Australia and saw a black swan for the first time. It shocked them. Why? Because it shattered their entire framework. One sighting instantly proved centuries of assumptions wrong. That's the point. A single outlier can collapse a whole system of belief. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit, why we're programmed to look at data and come up with a conclusion. I think part of it is because we go to school, we were taught 1 + 1 = 2, but that may not necessarily be the actual equation. 1 plus 1 may not always equal 2. 1 plus 1 could equal 0. Could equal 0, 0 meaning a black swan event. So this is why I like talking about black swans, is because we're so used to the idea of using empirical data to hypothesize or to come to a conclusion that because this has happened always, that means that this has to happen and nothing else outside of that. We get shades of this in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, where the whole world was used to the idea of being wicked, using violence, all kinds of stuff. You could argue there was some DNA tampering going on, all kinds of craziness. But Noah had found favor in the Lord. So to them, the flood was a black swan event. Why? Because it had never flooded like that before. Not in their history. They had empirical data that said October is coming after September. And before September was August. And before August was July. And we've never had a flood, Noah. So why are you building this boat? This is ludicrous. Look at our evidence. For hundreds, if not thousands of years, there's never been a flood like you're talking about. You're talking about a total delusion of the whole planet. You're talking about animals, everything being wiped out. And as they're talking to Noah, they're getting bumped by sheep, by goats, by bears, by lions, hyenas, all flocking, are all gathering towards the ark. And they're still arguing with Noah, saying, look, this is just a coincidence. All these animals that are showing up randomly, birds, everything, the barometric pressure lowering. This is just random. Clouds forming. This is just random. This we're using the empirical data that we have before our eyes, and we have to stick to this. This is our Bible. Noah, you are crazy for building this ark. You're using up all of our resources around us to feed these animals and to build an ark. And it's ludicrous. So day after day, they're approaching Noah saying, stop building the ark. Quit it. And Noah would preach. How did he preach? Every time he hit a nail into the ark, he was preaching doom and destruction. It was only a matter of time. And once the final nail hit, everybody that was right for arguably the last 120 years of him building the ark was now wrong in an instant. All their empirical data got washed away in the flood, and Noah was right. The only one, his family. Noah was the only one that was right about the flood. All the other data didn't make sense now. It became corrupt. They couldn't rationalize it. They couldn't figure it out. They couldn't go, okay, A plus B plus C equals D. That didn't make sense anymore. Or 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3. It was 0. Game over. And this is what happens to us, is we use the same formula as what they used before the flood, is because a rapture never happened where the whole world, all the church that believes in Jesus Christ all over the world, because that has never happened before, that means it cannot happen and will not happen. And they will swear on it. They will make fun of people like Watchman River, myself, others in the community, Bob Barber, Greg Messina, and others on Uptime, other various YouTube channels, they'll say, look at the empirical data. It's never happened before globally. We've never had people get raptured up to heaven. Therefore, you must reject this idea that was invented by some woman, by some man. You have to reject the idea that God removes the righteous from the wicked. You have to get rid of that. There's no story in the Old Testament that could ever mimic the idea of the world being condemned and a family being lifted up. Oh, wait, that's the flood. There's no other record besides the flood where God himself uses angels to pull people out of a city and will not destroy that city unless he finds 10 people, 10 righteous, and ends up destroying it because he found 4 people and pulled them out of the city. Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters, and then that whole place became ash. Why? Because that was an example for us to, 1, to not look back, but 2, to remember that there is judgment coming upon this world, and it's not to the righteous, it's to the wicked. And all these mockers and scoffers and people that are saying things like, where is God's mercy? Where is he? Where is he? He's nowhere. Look at all the people dying in India and Africa. Look at all the slaughter. There is no God. That's what they'll say. And yet we have proof in the Old Testament for our admonition, meaning for our learning, for our understanding. Look what has happened before, that this could happen, where God can remove the righteous and punish the wicked. And in fact, it's been talked about. Prophet after prophet has been laying down the groundwork saying, look, this is coming. So again, what we've learned from history is that we don't learn from history. I'm going to build a case for this. Taleb took the metaphor and turned it into a philosophy. So he's the guy that coined the idea of black swan events. He realized that events change our lives most. The wars, crashes, collapses, revolutions are almost never predicted. And worse, once they happen, we rewrite history to pretend that they were obvious. And this is part of the triple threat that happens because of a black swan event. The first thing is it's highly improbable. You can't guess that it's going to happen. It's an outlier. An outlier means it lies outside of every reasonable thought that you had as to why this could or could not happen, and it lies outside of that. The second thing is it changes the world forever. There's no going back. And the third thing is what Taleb is explaining here, is that we rewrite history to explain it away, and we say, oh, we should have saw it coming. We did see it coming. We didn't pay attention, whatever it is. That's proof that it was a black swan event, is people will try and explain it away as though it was common, like it was common sense. That's what happened after 9/11. 9/11 was a black swan event. It changed the world overnight. You don't fly the same way you did before 9/11. You get screened, all kinds. You have to check in, all kinds of stuff. You can't go into you can't go into the cockpit. I used to talk to the pilots once upon a time ago. You can't do that anymore. It's locked, and you don't know who the marshal is often. And they have marshals on these planes now. That never happened before. So the world changed. And then afterwards, everybody was explaining, all the heavy duty thinkers were thinking, the scholars were explaining to us how we should have saw this coming. But on September 10th, no one saw it coming. You could argue the terrorists, if you're those that think this is an inside job, you would say that the government knew this was going to happen. They had warnings. The point is, you didn't. I didn't. Some would argue that Alex Jones knew. There's proof of it, that he was like, hey, something's going to happen to some of America's precious buildings. He went on record, and you could go find his videos of him talking about it before, months before 9/11. So this is the paradox that we're in right now, is we know that there are black swan events, but we can't figure them out. And this is how Talib explained this in his book, The Black Swan. So the most important events in history and in your life are unpredictable. But that doesn't stop us from trying to explain after the fact, usually blaming the wrong things. Now let's talk about what that means when we look back at history. For what have we really learned from history? If we're honest, not much. Sure, we know some things. We know what we know. We even know some things we don't know, like I don't know what next year's economy will look like, but at least I'm aware of it. But the scariest stuff, it's the things that we don't know that we don't know. That's where we get blindsided from. That's where the world changes overnight. Nassim Taleb in The Black Swan lays it out with 3 rules for what makes something a true black swan. It's an outlier. It completely lies outside the realm of regular expectations. It has massive impact. It changes everything. After it happens, we act like we saw it coming. We make up explanations and feel smart in hindsight. The third part where we fail the most is we lie to ourselves. We reconstruct the past to pretend we were wise. Taleb also says we do not spontaneously learn that we don't learn that we don't learn. That's not a mistake. It's a mirror. We don't learn. We don't realize that we didn't learn. And even after multiple failures, we still don't wake up. And it's not just nations, it's businesses, churches, families, me, you. So let's just walk through a few examples. Pearl Harbor was a black swan event. 9/11, the 2008 housing crash, COVID-19. I believe it was a black swan event. It changed how people thought afterwards. I'm telling you, people were changed afterwards. Nobody trusts vaccines today. Nobody trusts their neighbor today. That wasn't like that before. And it snuck up on us. And as it was approaching, they're saying there's nothing to see here, folks. And then it took over. It captivated us the world over. It's on the news every night. Our premier, or one of the doctors, I should say, was every day. It was like 300 cases today of COVID, 14 died. Sorry to hear that. 14 died. And the next day, 16 died. Sorry, our condolences for your losses. And then after COVID was over, that lady got fired because the data that she has wasn't correct. And she was saying things like people were dying or dead that weren't actually dead. So she got removed from her office. The point is, COVID caught everybody's attention and it changed how we thought afterwards. You can't help but think different than before COVID, BC. How do we know this? Well, people are like this with vaccines. They're like, I'll never get a vaccine again. I don't care if polio comes back. I don't care. That tells you that COVID-19 was a black swan event because nobody gave a second thought towards vaccines before. The fall of the Soviet Union, another black swan. Nobody could have predicted that. The dot-com bubble, Challenger explosion, that rocked the world. I think I remember where I was. That was in January something, 1986, 1985, I believe it was. I was in high school. I think it was in grade 10 or something when that happened. It shocked everyone, shocked everyone. Vietnam, Afghanistan, twice. Fukushima. The idea that something could happen, that's not what we're talking about here, because then you could just say, well, this happened and I predicted whatever. No, it's when it catches everyone else off guard. Like, for example, Fukushima was built at just below sea level. I think it was like 100 or 200 meters below sea level, with a wall that they said, this is the Japanese, that it doesn't matter how big the waves are, they'll never get over this wall until it did. And then a tsunami hit and seawater entered in to some of the engines that were supposed to keep the lights on, all this kind of stuff. And then they weren't designed to handle seawater, and the whole thing collapsed. And some scientists are saying you will never be able to live in that exact same spot for thousands of years, for eons, because of that. Then you could say some scientists said this is inevitable, but the point is, if it was inevitable, then why did they build it? Why did they build it? They built it because they thought it wouldn't happen. That's obvious. But what we're doing now is we're explaining it away. They're saying they should have known. Well, if you have all the evidence, you should have told them. But the fact that no one said anything is kind of interesting in itself, because that falls into a black swan category. Chernobyl. Again, nobody was jumping up and down, at least in America anyway, saying that Chernobyl is going to blow up. Nobody said that. And the reason I saw the documentary, the makeshift documentary, I think it was a movie based on the event. The whole reason for it was because they were running a test. So again, if you're running a test, you would not think you're going to have a nuclear meltdown because of a test. If anything, people would say, oh, it's because of weather, or maybe an attack from another foreign country, or an inside job, or whatever, that Chernobyl has the potential. But nobody thought, because of a random test, that would cause it to collapse. Nobody thought that. The Iraq War, remember that? Where weapons of mass destruction, all this, people never predicted that we would go in there and then not find anything as well. The Enron scandal, the Great Depression, stock market panics, ignored terrorist plots, overtrust in AI, nukes, tech, all this stuff. Like, again, as I'm sharing this, what you're doing now is you're reading up on history and you're trying to explain it to me. Here's why we know it could have been prevented, or here's what we know now. You're falling into the black swan category. This is what we do. We try and explain it away, but nobody was there explaining it away before it happened, because that's not how we think. We don't think in terms of extremism. That's not where we live. We can't accept it. So if we said something like we've been talking about on our show, that there is a high risk or high potential of something happening on July 4th, we would throw it away and say, no, we have too much security in America. There's no reason for us to believe that something can happen, because Trump is going to have a press conference on Monday, a week from now. There's peace talks with Iran. They're going to be coming to the table. We have a plan in place for Yemen, all this stuff. And there's no reason for you in America to think that anything could go wrong, because That's not how we think. In fact, what we'll do is we'll tear people down and say, you're an idiot for saying that America it could be compromised on the greatest day of American history. You're an idiot for saying that. But again, as a black swan, I have to be that voice. I have to be in that area. This is just where I live, that I have to look outside the box and say, when people say it can never happen, that's when the soil gets planted for a black swan to grow. And we are highly vulnerable right now, highly vulnerable in North America, specifically the United States of America. And I would suggest specifically Washington, D.C., because they're not really a state. They're part of the District of Columbia. So if you're going to have an interruption, because nobody likes to go to the extreme like I do, to me, it makes most logical sense that you would have something happen in Washington on Friday, July 4th. It's just, I know it's a crazy time, but if everybody is saying no, you have to look at that and go, well, what are we missing? What is lying dormant? What stone is lying there where we haven't overturned it? Because what's going to happen on Monday, if something happens on Friday, is on Monday, people are going to explain it away. They're going to say, oh, we should have saw it coming. We should have watched the Black Swan revelations because he was talking about this leading up to July 4th. And he was the only one that said, watch out, watch out. That's because we don't like to live in extremism. And what I'm saying is keep an eye, because if everybody was saying July 4th, then I'd be like, that's not it. It's not it, because everybody, the president of the United States has shut down America on July 4th, saying we have impending news coming down the pipes that something bad is going to happen on July 4th. So we're shutting down the country just for 24 hours. We'll celebrate on the 5th or the 6th or the next week or whatever it is, but he's not doing that. So that tells me that you have to be aware. You have to be aware because there is no panic. Instead, there's celebrations because we're like at ease, because Iran's been taken care of. They're not a threat anymore, even though insiders are starting to say things like, aren't we expecting a retaliation in America? Wouldn't that make the most sense? But instead we say we did the most beautiful operation with B-2 bombers and we annihilated Iran, and that's it. Now they're going to come to the table and talk peace. It's like, well, there are rumors of people going, they're going to retaliate. They're going to retaliate. Trump even said, we're expecting retaliation. Then he said they launched one rocket at Israel or something like that. And that was it. It's quiet. It's eerily quiet right now. And this is where black swans fertilize. This is where they start to grow, is when it's really quiet. So with the black swan events that I mentioned, each time the warnings were missed, experts ignored, overconfidence everywhere, and then after the damage, we say, well, of course, we should have seen that coming. Now let's jump to the Bible. As I mentioned, the book of Ecclesiastes is a book of gathering. It's the wisest man, arguably in history, next to Jesus Christ. Obviously, Jesus Christ is the wisest. He's the creator of the universe. He's the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. But for 100% human only, Solomon comes in second place. I don't think anybody would question that there are smarter people today than Solomon. So he was gathering all his intel, all his information to put it in the book of Ecclesiastes. And he said, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And if you look it up in Hebrew, because people like to go to Hebrew and Latin and all that, it basically means gatherer as well. He also said, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but time and chance happen to them all. Time and chance happen to them all. That's the black swan logic right there. You can train, prepare, plan, but time and chance still strike. You don't control everything. We have another example of a black swan event, Ecclesiastes 9:14-16, or I should say black swan thinking. There was a little city and few men within it. There came a great king against it and besieged it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he, by his wisdom, delivered the city, yet no man remembered that same poor man. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words were not heard. He saved them, and they forgot him. Why? Because there was no explosion, no headline, no drama. Wisdom isn't flashy. It doesn't sell. It doesn't sell newspapers. It gets ignored. This isn't just a Bible thing. This happens in our world all the time. Here are some real examples of heroic actions in the United States that we've forgotten because they didn't trigger outrage or adrenaline. Stanislav Petrov, a Russian who refused to launch nukes on a false alarm. This was back in 1983. He got an alarm, and the standard protocol was him to let his upper echelon know that they are going to be under attack, that they were going to be, it was imminent that they were going to be attacked. And rumor has it that they thought perhaps it could have been the United States. But he didn't do that. Instead, he ignored the alarm and nothing happened, and it turned out to be a false alarm. So he saved the world from entering into a war, and nobody knows who Stanislav Petrov is, including you, including me. Before this video, I didn't know who he was either. Frank Church exposed illegal government spying in the 70s. Don't know who he is. Jonas Salk quietly developed polio vaccine that saved millions of children. We don't know who he is. We don't pay attention to him. Colleen Rowley, Harry Markopoulos, Rick Bright, whistleblowers who tried to warn us and were mostly ignored. Every economist who quietly prevented financial collapse, ignored. Civil rights allies who risked everything without ever getting praise. Fire code engineers who saved thousands of lives by changing how we build buildings. We don't know who they are, nor do we care. We remember the explosion, but not the one who prevented it. We remember the general, but not the quiet wise man who said, don't go to war. Sun Tzu once said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But he also warned, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And most of the time, we don't know ourselves. We don't know the enemy. We think we do, but we don't. And like Taleb says in his book, we don't learn that we don't learn that we don't learn. Donald Rumsfeld is quoted as saying, there are known knowns, and there are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. The unknown unknowns, that is where black swans live. So what can we do? Taleb would argue it's not what you think. Excuse me. He actually mocks the idea that we'll just think our way through disaster. He gives an example of our ancestors. This is him speaking. When a lion appeared, the ones who ran survived. The ones who stopped to think about the strategy, they were eaten. And this is how we think today. We're like, you know what? Our parents died from a lion because they stayed and thought about it. Whereas, or our parents ran and fled, and now I'm alive because of what they did. And all the others died because they sat around. But Taleb is also saying that we don't spend enough time thinking about things. Instead, we react. This is how we are as a society. Something big happens, all of a sudden we lock the doors on airplanes, we screen everybody, we treat everybody different the next day, and we spend millions and millions, if not billions of dollars to make sure that that exact event doesn't happen again, treating it like an outlier of a black swan event itself, saying black swans happen one after another, and that's not true. That's not how they happen. A black swan will never happen the same way again. That's the definition of a black swan. It's unique. And yet people will go overboard to prevent the same exact black swan 24 hours later. They'll do that. They overreact. And that's part of the DNA of having a black swan event before your very eyes is you overreact. That's how you know you're witnessing a black swan event. So real wisdom might live in not overthinking, but in preparing the mind before the chaos. When chaos comes, you don't freeze, you move wisely. So this is why you need to think more. Because again, if you're thinking about the potential, the extremeness of the idea that a lion could attack you in your home sounds unreasonable, then you should prepare for it so that when it does happen, you're prepared and you don't freeze or you don't run. You can actually take out the lion. So instead of pretending we can outsmart uncertainty, maybe the answer is simple. Respect randomness, doubt your confidence, and build habits that don't depend on perfect knowledge. Because if you think you have perfect knowledge in regards to your empirical data, and you're like, I understand this data inside and out, well, that could be a flaw in itself because that's not where a black swan lives. It is not the thinking that makes us wise. It is the awareness of our limits. But Taleb goes even further. He says the real danger is the gap of what we know and what we think we know. There's a gap. And that gap is the breeding ground for black swans. It's not the ignorance that hurts us most. It's the illusion of knowledge. He calls it the problem of the empty suit. People who speak with confidence about systems they don't understand, the more convinced we are of our models, predictions, and forecasts, the more fragile we become. We fall in love with our own narratives. We make up reasons for why things happen after they happen, and we pretend that we saw it coming all along. That's hindsight bias. That's our comfort mechanism. It's dangerous. The black swan doesn't show up in the things we openly fear. It hides in the blind spots we've convinced ourselves don't exist. So let's tackle the idea a little bit of what I believe is the greatest black swan event of all time. That is the rapture of the church. Us being raptured before the 7-year tribulation begins. This is what I believe because it fits all the criteria. Think about it. Changes the world overnight. Every Christian is gone. Every Christian that believes in Jesus Christ, that he died on a cross, rose again on the third day, and is forever sealed. they're gone. So the world has changed, meaning the Antichrist now moves in to that vacancy, and everybody's going to be looking for an answer as to what happened, and he's going to be able to explain it away, because that's the third part of the Black Swan event, is you explain it away and you come up with all kinds of concoctions as to what happened. Aliens happened. There was a laser beam. There was spontaneous combustion that happened in churches because they were built this way or that way or whatever it is, and they're gone. And again, the reason why the rapture fits the greatest Black Swan event of all time is it's highly improbable, as in we don't know when it's going to happen. And most don't believe that could happen. Most. You could even argue some Christians don't believe it's going to happen, that we're going to be raptured so that the world could be laid waste. They don't believe that. That fits the criteria one, that the whole world, it has to affect the whole world, and it has to change the whole world overnight. It has to be unpredictable. Jesus said no man knows that hour. So that's highly unpredictable if you don't know the hour. And then the whole world changes. And then the third thing is you have to explain it away. You use hindsight bias. You look at all the breadcrumbs and you're like, yeah, we should have saw this, all this stuff. Meanwhile, the Bible's talking about it, but only a few will grasp hold of the future. There's only a few. That's why I think the Black Swan event fits all three of the criteria. And we've talked a little bit about it. So what do we learn? What have we learned through all this rambling that I've just been doing for the past 50 minutes? What we should learn is that we don't learn from history. We don't. It's not in our DNA. It's not in our nature to go, oh, you mean randomness is what catches us guard? Yes. Something that is unpredictable catches us off guard. Yes. That is unpredictable. Yes. So boring, random, or boring stuff that is just normal, predictable because of empirical data, that's not what we should pay attention to. Correct. But what tends to happen is we pay attention after an extreme event. Then all of a sudden it's like the lights come on. We wake up and we're like, oh, panicky. Meanwhile, you have all kinds of things lining up that says that we are ripe, I should say, for a Black Swan event to happen. But we can't predict when or where or how it happens. It's impossible, because then it's not a Black Swan event. It's a crazy paradox, isn't it? So I hope you got something out of today's video. I know we went a little bit long, but I think every once in a while it's nice to explain a little bit more about my channel, why I came into existence, why I think the way that I do. If I'm on a panel and 4 people say this, I'm going to say something else, because it's not to stir up a fight. It's not to instigate. It's to think outside the box and just talk to my family. I'll be like that. If everybody, even if it's wisdom, I'll be on the other side. I'll look like a fool to make a point, to say, okay, look, we got to look at it from all angles at the expense of being ridiculed. I have to look at everything. I have to weigh it all out and go, yeah, this makes sense, but let me use a foolish observation to figure this out from the outside. Because if you don't do that, I think you are going to repeat the same pattern over and over again. And isn't that insanity? That you repeat the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? Isn't that what insanity is? Thank you guys for being on the show today. I really appreciate you spending an hour with me and watching Rev Talk. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. And again, I hope nothing happens this weekend. I really do. I really do. But thank you. Please subscribe to this channel, share this video, and I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.
Black Swan Revelations here on YouTube brought you today's mind-bending journey. Dive into the discussion, your comments, questions, prayer requests, and powerful testimonies of Jesus' love are what fueled this community. Did today's episode hit home? Smash that like button. New here? Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a live stream or a video upload. Thanks for being part of today's adventure. Catch you in the next video, or maybe even in the clouds. Stay curious, stay